What's going on, Wire listeners? My name is Drew Farley, and you're listening to The Wire, your student radio, live right here at the University of Oklahoma Memorial Union. If you're walking by on this kind of, it's a pretty nice day outside, I would say. If you're walking by, if you got your headphones on, if you don't have your headphones on, but you're planning to later in the day, remember, you don't have to just listen to that Pandora. You don't have to listen to Spotify. You know, you can take a break and check out what's going on your student radio on The Wire. You just click onto your little internet app and tune in to thewire.ou.edu. If you've got a laptop or you're at your desktop, you can even watch us because The Wire is streaming live on thewire.ou.edu. Just click that video tab. Well, my name's Drew Farley, and this is something sports-related. Every Monday from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, I come on here and we talk about everything sports-related, and it's usually a lot of football, seeing as it is the University of Oklahoma, and OU football is pretty big. But today we've got a jam-packed show. We're going to recap that.
Hey, man, first I would just like to say I'm a huge fan of your show. Well, I mean, about 2 semesters ago, and so is that when something sports-related started?
Yes, sir. We started 2 semesters ago. We took a semester off, and now here we are back at it.
I mean, I used to sit there in the union and eat my Quiznos and just think, man, I don't know much about sports, but this stuff just makes me happy, you know?
That's what we aim to please. We aim to please here at Something Sports Related.
It's good stuff. Y'all were talking about the Mavericks, and I'm like, man, I don't really care about the Mavericks, but this is like the most interesting Mavericks conversation I ever heard. Awesome.
Excellent. So, hello, Wire listeners. Thank you for listening today. This is Drew Farley with Something Sports Related. So let's go ahead and hop into Something Sports Related right now. Recently, this afternoon, Bob Stoops in his every Monday press conference announced that Trevor Knight is out for 1 to 2 weeks, which means Blake Bell will be your starting quarterback this weekend against Tulsa. Kendall Thompson has also been cleared to practice, so he may get some snaps as well. There you go. That's the quarterback situation. Apparently, Trevor Knight injured his knee early in the first quarter. The staff was not aware of it until halftime when Trevor was examined by team doctors who cleared Trevor to play in the second half, but apparently it was a little bit worse than they thought. He had an MRI on Sunday, no immediate threats revealed, but for safety reasons, they will continue to keep him out until he's cleared by doctors once more. And last week, I came in here and right after the Bob Stoops press conference, or I guess actually like during a little bit. Anyway, Bob Stoops had named Blake Bell to start the weekend because Trevor Knight, still indefinite, not exactly sure how long he'll be out still, was out for the game. And so Blake Bell, the backup quarterback, went and played. And all he did was break an Oklahoma record for most passing yards and first start at quarterback. And that's mind-blowing when you think of the quarterbacks that have come before. You know, Landry Jones, of course, was kind of thrown into the fire, so you can't expect him to, exactly reproduce that same sort of thing. But with Heisman winners Jason White, Sam Bradford, Blake Bell shattered their records of first start passing yardage with 417 yards, had a phenomenal game. So overall, this team has a lot of players who were criticized last year for poor performances, and then you combine those guys with a lot of talent that was really unknown, and you get this really kind of interesting blend of young players and guys who are trying to redeem themselves, trying to go out on a high note, and obviously you sprinkle in like an Aaron Colvin, Gabe Eichert, who have been perennially productive players for the team, and you start to get an interesting team. Now, do we know who this Oklahoma team is right now after 4 games, right? Probably not. Okay, it's still early, but we know that the coaches are putting their guys in the best position possible, and they're getting them to play extremely hard. And so far, that's been enough to rack up some impressive wins. This weekend, obviously, TCU coming into town. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So let's talk about this. If he's not there next season, who's the head coach at Austin? In Austin.
I'm not that guy.
Are you buying into Nick Saban?
No, not at all.
Are you buying into some of the other guys that they've talked about from the NFL? Like
I haven't heard of him.
Jeff Fisher and guys like that? No?
I'm not part of that.
So how about this? I must sell you on my candidate.
Okay.
2 words. Art Briles.
I don't know.
Art Briles is Texas born, bred, and he's brought up there, and he's beaten Texas with a Baylor team. There you go. He's beaten Oklahoma for the first time in Baylor history. He's brought them to become one of the most relevant teams offensively in the country, basically in 3 or 4 years.
True.
Right? he has guys who are not so talented below him, like low on that team, playing like they are. And here's the deal with Art Briles. Mac Brown recruits a lot right now. This is my evaluation of Mac Brown. Recruits the best, doesn't develop them, puts them out there. They play mediocre. They go to the NFL. They get developed into what they should be.
Right.
This is what Art Briles does. He takes those 2 stars. He takes those 3 stars. He brings them in. He develops them into RG3s.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the deal. RG3, yes, is exceptionally talented, athletically gifted, made lots of plays in college, making plays in the NFL. Art Briles took RG3 from good to Heisman.
Right.
As a coach there with his system. And it shows because Nick Florence went and ran just as successfully on offense.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, Bryce Petty seems to be doing even better than they've done in the past. So Art Briles, in terms of developing guys and recruiting, right now, ESPN.com polls have Baylor as a top 20 recruiting class currently with the commits that they have. Now, these are not signed or anything. That's almost blasphemous when you start thinking about it. Yeah. He's recruiting kids to Baylor. This is mind-blowing. It's like, I mean, if we say in 2 years Kansas has a top 15 recruiting class, you're gonna double take that. You know what I mean? It's the same kind of thing. Anyway.
I mean, even other than that, you're looking at this game. This is a top 15 matchup. Last year, the game to go to was the Notre Dame game. It was number 5 against
exactly.
Whatever. It was like a top 5.
It was a top 10 matchup.
Top 10 matchup. This is the game. There's only 2 home games left this year. The other one's Iowa State. I mean, it's just Iowa State. It's just Texas Tech, and I think that's what a lot of people are thinking. But it's not just Texas Tech. Yeah. Look at that thing again, because this is 15 against 10. This is an undefeated Tech team, and this is your Notre Dame game of this year.
Easily. And you know what? I think even though that Notre Dame game had ended up having national championship implications, ended up having implications on OU for the rest of the season, to me, this is a completely different Oklahoma team. And if you need a home game to define who you're going to be at home when a bigger dog comes into your house for the next 3 to 4 years, whether for all these freshmen on defense, for all these freshmen and sophomore on defense, for all the freshmen and sophomore guys who are on the bench or the guys in waiting on offense, this is the game where you need to say, hey, this is who we have on our team for the rest of the year. Like I said, finding identity offensively, continuing to improve defensively. This is the game where you can say, as a freshman and sophomore class, when you come to Norman ranked above us, we're going to embarrass you, period. And it starts with the fans, especially on defense, where the Sooners need to play better than they do on offense. So let's move into the breakdown. I think we've got all fired up about our fan rant, and we don't want stuff going on. So let's go ahead and dive right in, starting with last Thursday's NFL game. We're going to do an NFL preview here. Carolina Panthers taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And after an 0-2 start to the 2013 season, Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers have rebounded in a big way, if you have not heard. After last Thursday night's 31-10 beatdown of the winless Bucs, the Panthers now sit at 4-3 and are starting to feel confident about a shot at the playoffs, especially in their division. Cam Newton, whose instant rookie success has since been lost with the entire Andrew Luck RG3 craze, is putting together his best season yet, going 23 for 32 of 32 for 222 yards and 2 touchdowns, also rushing for 50 yards last Thursday night. And on the season, Newton hasn't put up staggering numbers with his passing game with 1,552 yards, but his 12 touchdowns to 5 touchdown-interception ratio reflects a maturing quarterback who takes care of the ball. So don't fall asleep on the Carolina Panthers, because this is a team that has truly improved over the past couple seasons on both sides of the ball. As if you didn't know this, the Panthers defense is now first in the NFL in points allowed. Meanwhile, Greg Schiano and the Bucs drift further into the void and are one of the 2 remaining winless teams left in the league. When you look at the roster, there's tons of talent. Reed, Gerald McCoy, Darrell Revis in a solid defense, not even to mention Carl Nix at guard, Doug Martin, a young running back, Vincent Jackson, and Mike Williams at receiver. This team smells exactly like the 2012 Chiefs, and while Glennon has done an admirable job so far in spot duty, they may be a coach and quarterback away from relevance. As far as the Ahmad Brooks hit goes, I think it's a reflection. It's the reflection, or it's the realization of the evolution of the new rules that protect not just the quarterbacks but all players. Now, the hit by all definitions in the book was legal when watched back in replay. But the fact that it was a hard hit and it was close to being a hit to the neck, the referees, who are paid by the guys upstairs, protect the moneymakers of the NFL. Obviously, I'm talking about the elite quarterbacks, the Drew Breeses, the Tom Bradys, the Peyton Mannings. The referees are therefore forced to throw the flag to protect that investment. Now, I don't like it. I know we need to protect players in the league, and that as football players get bigger, stronger, and faster, the risk of injury skyrockets. Not just goes, it skyrockets. It's ridiculous. The guys who are playing in the league right now are enormous compared to 10 years ago. And I recognize that that's why rules about hits to the head have become so important. And it's why equipment manufacturers, the guys who make the helmets, they work tirelessly to improve the protection of these players. When you think about things like the flak jacket that protects the body of quarterbacks, a lot of those quarterbacks, almost all of them are wearing these flak jackets to protect the ribs. They've become commonplace in the league. Now, I get that quarterbacks and offenses are exciting. And names like Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, those guys, those are the reasons people come to watch the game. They want to see wild, crazy passes, and they want to see a defense carved up with the last seconds ticking off the clock. But this is a game, and those defenders get paid too. And when they have to constantly relearn how to tackle and where to hit a player, when, like we've said, players are doing nothing but getting faster, it cripples their ability to make big plays or affect the game long term. They used to be able to hit guys, check guys, push guys up near the line, or at least make their presence felt. Where's the threat if the quarterback knows if they hit me, we get yardage anyway, so I can hang on to the ball and look for a big hit and take a hit? That's not toughness on the quarterback. That's a hole in the way the game is designed to be played right now. In the fact that's a strategy sometimes, or it's not a threat that the quarterback is afraid of getting hit anymore, or he's just looking forward to it because even though it hurts him a little, his team benefits. It's not fair to the defensive players. Now, when Ahmad Brooks comes around the edge and sacks Drew Brees with a hit above the numbers, yes, but still makes contact with his body, with the pads, not his actual body, because remember, he's covered head to toe with padding. He's got a helmet, he's got the shoulder pads, the breastplate, and the flak jacket. So his entire body is fair game, basically, because it's protected. When he makes contact with his body on the shoulder pads, square to Brees' body, yes, eventually, after he makes that initial contact with the arm, part of his elbow slips onto the neck. It was not, that's not where the initial contact was. And he gets flagged for making contact, and he gets flagged not because the contact was by definition made illegally, but because it was a powerful blow and it looked bad. I mean, yeah, it looked terrible. Drew Brees' neck looked like a cartoon character if you go back and look at this play. But let's not lie to everyone and say it's because he hit him too high, because it was roughing the passer who was still holding on to the football for a late hit because he was still holding on to the football. Call it like it is, and let's make a new rule called roughhousing. Tim Hasselbeck was on ESPN radio this morning. I was listening, driving up to campus, and he's talking about how a lot of the guys 6 and 7 years ago watching this play, it's not flagged. 49ers probably go on to win that game. They're talking about how this hit wouldn't be flagged 6 or 7 years ago, and how there's no real reason to call this other than it was a bad hit and it looked bad, and so they start to call it roughhousing. That it's just a rule. That's really all it is. Take away a good play from the defensive player because his contact was too rough, not because it was illegal by definition in the rule books right now. And I don't like it. I hate it. I hate that is a disadvantage for the defensive players and that they're making it harder on the defensive players just because the offense sells. And yes, they're protecting players, but he hit him in the pads and eventually made contact on the neck. That's fine. That's fine with if your initial contact is legal and part of your body ends up carrying through the tackle like you're supposed to do. I think it shouldn't be counted, especially when you consider Ahmad Brooks, who is so much bigger than Drew Brees, would have to dive at the feet. What is this guy supposed to do? Go that low? They've told him that they can't go that low. And Drew Brees is a small 6 foot tall guy. He's gonna get hit high because that's where the guys are hitting. Anyway, I don't like it. We talk about roughhousing. I don't like it, but at the end of the day, the rules and the nature of the game will only continue to move in the direction of cautionary calls like this, and the game's going to continue to evolve, or as some people say, devolve. But at least, let's be honest with how we call the game, especially when you consider hits like this are wildly inconsistent from game to game. There's no clean-cut definition, and there's way too much gray area. There's way too much gray area in terms of protecting players right now, and it really seems like it's because this is the beginning of a new sort of generation of football. The game itself, it's a new era in football, and league officials and the rules committee are having to make it up as they go, is the reason it's so wildly inconsistent. So it's kind of like we have to put up with it as they try to figure out what's okay, what's not okay, what to call what. This hit, by all definitions that they have in the rule book, is legal for me, and I don't like it. And you can say it's too high, you can say he made contact with the neck, but to me, the defender hit him in the pads, and then eventually it carried through to the neck somewhat, and the fact that it was such a vicious hit and it looked bad was the reason it got called, not because he hit him in the helmet or he clotheslined him directly in the neck. Let's talk about this Auburn game, as Auburn really... You got to start talking about destiny at this point, because miracles don't come true 2 weeks in a row to the same team in college football. It's really just, it's something I haven't seen before. As a young guy myself, it's something I just haven't seen before. But it was an Iron Bowl for the history books on Saturday afternoon that really added to the undying mystique that made college football and college football rivalries so magical for fans, not just in the state of Alabama, but around the country. In what might be the most highly anticipated Iron Bowl in the history of the rivalry, the number 1 Alabama Crimson Tide rolled into Auburn to take on the 4th-ranked Tigers. And first-year head coach Gus Malzahn has returned to the team and brought back a swagger to an absolutely electric rushing offense that gave even Alabama fits throughout the day. In fact, Keith Marshall, Trey Mason, and the dynamic Tiger offense racked up 296 yards on the ground against the number 1 rush defense in the country, that is Alabama. Now, Auburn had just come off one instant classic with a Hail Mary tipped off 2 Georgia defenders into the hands of Ricardo Lewis to win the game in miraculous fashion, and Alabama, meanwhile, had played 2 weeks of just bad football teams, and they even struggled against Mississippi State 21-7 in a terrible performance, to be honest with you. It is Alabama, and you have way more talent. You should dominate that team. But by the end of it all, 4 missed field goals by the Crimson Tide that included 2 absolute shanks, a block, and a last-second prayer really reflect the problem with the Tide on that day. Missed opportunities. Now, I've never seen Alabama make that many mistakes in a football game. And no, they weren't big mistakes, but they were little mistakes here and there that added up to be just enough to keep a scrappy Auburn team in the game. On the flip side, Auburn went into the game without flinching. And even in 3rd and 18 situations, they lined up confidence against what might be one of the best defensive dynasties ever, that they would make a play, which they did early in the game, converting and eventually scoring on a 45-yard run from Nick Marshall. But A.J. McCarron and the Alabama offense answered with 3 consecutive touchdowns to lead 21-7. But a quick touchdown drive to end the first half put Auburn right back in it, again, unflinchingly, with all the momentum going into the locker room in the second half, because Alabama elected to receive the football to start the football game. So in the second half, defenses seemed to tighten up for both teams. Good halftime adjustments by both teams. But Auburn managed to catch back up, knotting it at 21. Then setting up the field up in what should be impossible field position at the half-yard line, A.J. McCarron found Amari Cooper deep down the field of play action for a 99-yard touchdown pass, what would be the longest offensive play in program history for Alabama, one of the most storied programs in college football lore and history of college football ever. Longest play ever. And in that situation, most teams would take that heavyweights biggest hit to the jaw and fall to the ground. But Gus Malzahn kept his team focused, and they answered right back, tying it up with another magical play from Nick Marshall, who faked a run off the read option that they run all the time. He switches the ball into his running arm, switches it back into his passing arm, and then sidearms a throw to a wide-open Sammy Coates because the Tide defense sucked up on the outside run because he is inches away from the line of scrimmage, has faked the run so well, and it was an incredible touchdown run. So as time ran off the clock, Nick Saban called a draw play with TJ Yeldon, who got out of bounds barely in time, and argued with the officials, forced replay, until they finally gave Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide a 1 second left on the clock that they fought so passionately for. Saban trotted out his field goal unit that had gone 0-3 on the day, this time with a different kicker, who was their long-range specialist, to attempt a 57-yarder that would fall just short into the arms of Chris Davis. And as 100,000 fans held their breath and thousands more around the country gazed into their TVs, history was made as Chris Davis zigzagged around an ill-prepared Alabama unit for 109 yards and a touchdown with no time on the clock to knock off the number one team in the country, 34-28, and end the Tide season with not only a loss that knocked them out of the SEC title contention, but probably national title contention, preventing them from making a run at history to win 3 straight national titles. This was probably the most amazing play I have ever witnessed as a college football fan. This is probably one of the plays that will be remembered in college football history. Chris Davis tweets this morning that he walked into his geology class early this morning to a standing ovation. And War Eagle, if you didn't see the scene of them rolling the corner where the trees used to stand, this is what makes the sport special, is a team that can make miracles happen 2 consecutive weeks. And they played the Tide tough the entire time. And you know what? It proves any coach forever, especially Gus Malzahn, can always tell his team, we just have to be in the game and make things happen and give ourselves a chance. You hear it all the time. We chalk it up to coach speak. But if you give yourself a chance, this kind of thing, while it's rare, can happen. Keep playing, don't flinch, and you give yourself a chance to do something special and something that will always be remembered. And that's exactly what Chris Davis and the Auburn Tigers did. Phenomenal weekend in college. So we've talked about rivalry weekend for a lot of the show to this point. And while the much-anticipated Bedlam game didn't fall in what might have been the best weekend of college football in a long time, it's a week after, it's still a chance for more terrific football to be played. Oklahoma State is as hot as any team in the country after not just beating the Baylor Bears, but embarrassing them in an extremely hostile environment up there in Stillwater. They're riding a 7-game win streak and have shown marked improvement with each consecutive game. Clint Shelf has carved himself into a dual-threat quarterback who can be extremely efficient both running and passing. Shaq Rowland and Jeremy Smith work together with Shelf and a solid front line to make for a scary and very multiple rushing offense that will bust big runs and set up dangerous play-action passes deep down the field that they do not miss very often. Even the Oklahoma State defense has shown that they might be the best they've ever had, with Calvin Barnett eating up the middle at defensive tackle, and Justin Gilbert might just turn out to be a first-round pick in the secondary. Even on special teams, when you're talking about the Cowboys, the Pokes can threaten teams on any given punt or kick. Now it all adds up to be a very talented football team and a confident football team that not only wants to down their hated in-state rival because they're their hated in-state rival, but they want revenge from a game a year ago that they lost in overtime when they still feel that they outplayed Oklahoma a year ago. Now the thought that Oklahoma State might fall asleep coming off a huge win, going into a bye week with an early kickoff, that's been thrown around among, in this area with some of the sports radio stations around. It's thought, okay, maybe they come out and hungover, overconfident, maybe not all the way in this game. Maybe they're underestimating Oklahoma. I don't really buy into that. I don't think that will play a huge role in the performance of this Cowboy offense, of this Cowboy defense, and of this Cowboys special teams. They know they have to win this game to win the Big 12. This is their conference championship game, and they get to try and take down their rival when they do it. So how in the world does OU march into Stillwater confident they can win when most people count the 18th ranked Sooners out in a down year with injuries seemingly everywhere? Because despite the odds, this Oklahoma team is a team that has a fighting spirit that I personally have grown to admire. Sure, they get shredded by Tyler Lockett on the back end, and they haven't looked especially dominant against a quality opponent all year. In fact, most of the games the Sooners have won by a margin of 10 points or less, in contrast to an Oklahoma State team that has a habit of blowing out the other team. But they make it a dogfight, and they scratch and they claw their way into games against the odds, and you can expect that they'll come fired up against their hated rival with upset on the brain. Gabe Eichert was at the press conference this morning, and he says, we don't look at ourselves as underdogs. This is still Oklahoma, and we still believe we're the best team on the field when we get out there. And that's the attitude and the swagger that you have to have. It's the attitude and the swagger that Auburn had when they marched onto their home field and they took down the number one team in the country in a phenomenal football game that we've already talked about. Now, Trevor Knight has taken a struggling offense and turned it into a dangerous and borderline dominant rushing attack that has the potential to score a bunch of points even against the Pokes, or at least they'll be able to keep that Cowboy offense shivering on the sideline. And even though the defense has shown cracks for Oklahoma, they've been able to pressure the quarterback more than they have in a few years, and they finally started slowing down the run. So I give the Sooners a chance to win this game, but they'll need to have some luck against a very good team on the road. But it comes down to this. Saturday morning at 11 a.m., two groups of young men will jog into a cold arena to kick off the final Saturday of college football. Both teams will line up and try to run the football on one another, and the game will be won or lost in the trenches, where the game is at its most primal state, and whichever group can win that battle of the trenches may just win the football game. Hang on to your seats, football fans, because this past weekend has taught us anything about college football. It's that in a rivalry game, you can't count on anything except that both teams will fight until whatever crazy play ends the game. And this Saturday, 6th-ranked Oklahoma State hosts 18th-ranked Oklahoma. And just as the growing rivalry name suggests, it will be Bedlam.